You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast with your ADHD coach and expert, Zena. Hello, my beautiful sparkly brained friend. Hi, I am so glad you hit play today because we are talking about something so important and very personal, right? For many of us, very, very personal. And that is we are talking about ADHD and masking. So before we dive in, I just want to say thank you for hitting play, and I am so happy that you are here, my friend. So you've probably heard the term masking before, right? Maybe you've known that you're doing it and really felt like you were masking, or maybe you're completely unaware, which is also very possible. So today in this episode, here's what we're doing. We are going to talk about what masking actually is, and we're going to dive into the question, is masking actually a bad thing for people with ADHD? We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about telling the difference between what is like a healthy coping strategy versus something that is harmful where we are like hiding ourselves. And of course, we're going to talk about where and how you can begin to unmask. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover in today's episode, my friend, and I am so excited for this. I was very shocked when I scrolled back through all of the episodes. I think this is like number 123. And I was like, surely I've done one on masking. I couldn't find one. It's like, oh, okay. I've obviously talked about it before in other episodes, but I just couldn't find one. So here we are. I think we need to talk about it. So what is masking, right? Masking is also sometimes referred to as camouflaging, right? And it is when somebody with ADHD hides, compensates, or downplays part of themselves in order to appear more neurotypical. Okay, so that could look like forcing yourself to sit still when you just really want to move your body. Maybe it's holding back from blurting out what you're thinking, even when you're really excited to talk, right? Or pretending to be okay when you actually you feel like you're drowning inside. Masking can also look like over-preparing, people-pleasing, or copying other people to try and fit in or blend in, right? Most neurodivergent humans mask, right? It is very common, very talked about in the autistic community, okay? And of course, I'm not going to speak through that lens today. I'm going to speak through the ADHD lens, but it's a thing us neurodivergent humans do, right? And it's absolutely something that those of us with ADHD do. Okay? And let's be real, all humans mask to some extent. Okay? We have all been taught to do this since we were very little. I'm sure many times you heard, stop doing that. That's weird. Right? You're so weird. Why do you do that? Right? Well, that's not normal. Don't do that. Sit still, stop fidgeting, stop talking so much. We have learned from this very young age what is considered socially acceptable and what's not. And I also want to say that most of that messaging is well intended. So our parents might say, hey, that's not normal, don't do that. And while, we internalize that in often a very negative way, they're not meaning to hurt us. They are meaning to say, hey, I don't want you to be rejected. I don't want you to be left out at school or told off by your teacher. So this is my way of trying to teach you that if you sit still, for example, then you're not going to get in trouble. Right? Often it is very well intended in the ways in which, people are saying it and teaching us. Sometimes not so much, let's be honest. But as a whole, I think often it is well intended. And here's the thing, as people with ADHD, often undiagnosed when we are young, we do things differently. We might be weird. I know I'm pretty weird. And so we hear these sorts of things all of the time and we learn to mask. Okay? Now, over time, when we're learning to mask and we're hearing that's weird, that's not normal, stop doing that, we start to believe that certain parts of us are too much, that they're wrong, that they're bad, that they're not okay. So, is masking actually bad? Right? The short answer, my friend, is no. And you might be surprised to hear that. Let's talk about it. So, masking isn't inherently bad. It can actually be very helpful, even protective, right? We mask in order to protect ourselves from getting hurt, from being rejected, from, being told that we are not okay in a certain setting. Like, it's a very protective thing that we do. And it can help us. Masking can help us to stay safe in uncomfortable or unfamiliar situations. It can help us to get through social events. It can help us to adapt to different environments or expectations. Okay? It's human to show different sides of ourselves depending on who we are with. For example, I don't swear when I give a talk to a group of retired people. Okay, but right here on this fucking podcast with you, my friend, you better believe I do, right? With most of my people in my life, I will swear. Now, that's not being fake or inauthentic when I choose not to do that. That's simply a different version of me in a different context, right? The way you speak to your best friend is going to be totally different from the way you probably speak to your boss, or at least your nana, or the checkout operator, right? We all shift a little, and that's just being human. But here's the difference. Masking is about protection, whereas authenticity is about expression. So the question becomes, are you choosing to adapt? Right? Are you choosing to adapt? I choose to adapt when I give a talk to a group of retired people, right? Or are you hiding because you don't feel safe to be yourself? And we're going to explore this a bit more, okay? So let's talk about the difference between when masking can be harmful, right? And, cause us pain and what that looks like, right? Versus when it can actually be a useful way in which we manage our symptoms. Okay. So let's talk about first, when is masking harmful, right? Masking becomes a problem when you feel like you have to do it all the time. Like it's just not safe to be yourself, right? When you feel unsafe being who you are, that is problematic, right? When you're constantly feeling like you have to perform rather than just, being. When you feel disconnected from who you are, like you don't even know who you are, right? And when you start to believe that the masked version of you is the one that is acceptable, and therefore that's who you just need to be, right? That kind of long-term masking can lead to burnout. Like when you've constantly got to be on, switched on in that regard, it's exhausting, right? It can lead to burnout. It can lead to a lot of anxiety, right? Especially social anxiety, to depression. It can also cause a lot of shame, low self-worth, and this sense of not really knowing who you actually are. So let me give you some examples of this, right? If you've ever taken really carefully, and I've done this in the past, really carefully cropped photos to hide the mess and the clutter in your home because you're really ashamed of what it looks like. That could be a form of masking that could be harmful, right? I've been in a situation where I've told my boss that I'm absolutely fine with my workload while silently drowning, right? Because I was really afraid that they would think that they shouldn't have put me in the position that I was in. Right? Another example from my life, and I'll give you some others outside of my life, but I shared a room when I first moved to London, I shared a room with my friend, right? And not only did I share a room, we had to share this tiny little double bed, and apparently that was the thing you did in London to keep the cost down, right? And I felt like I had to be constantly switched on when I was in the room at home with her, living in this flat with these strangers, constantly performing and never relaxing. That type of masking was incredibly harmful and draining, right? Other forms of masking that can become harmful are using alcohol to numb the anxiety, right? Done that one too. Hiding emotions to appear fine when really you are not fine. Right? Keeping the house like overly clean because you're so afraid that you're going to be judged for being lazy. Right? I'm curious, like, does any of that sound familiar? So now let's talk about managing our symptoms versus masking, right? Like, there is an important difference between masking in some unhealthy way versus actually managing our symptoms in a healthy and proactive way, all right? Now, what was so interesting in researching for this episode is, like, I was looking at some online articles and some research and things like this, and a lot of the articles were very negative towards masking, but many of the ways in which they described masking are actually very healthy, proactive things that we do in order to manage our symptoms, to manage our ADHD. For example, like if you take notes in a meeting so that you don't forget something, right? That is not masking. That's like a brilliant ADHD strategy, right? And even if you want to think of that as a form of masking, it's still a really good thing to do to manage your working memory challenges, right? Another one is, like, for me, I show up early to all of my appointments because I know I have got time blindness. Now, that's not me pretending to be something I'm not. That's me actually working with my ADHD brain. So I think we need to start with separating the two. Where am I managing my ADHD in a very smart way, in a very healthy way, like in a proactive way? Versus where am I masking my ADHD because I don't feel safe to show up as myself, right? Those are two different things. So why do we mask, right? We mask because we want to be accepted. We mask because we fear rejection. We fear experiencing failure or criticism. Hello, good old RSD, right? Rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, right? We mask because it's how we have survived. And it makes so much sense, right? It has been a helpful protection mechanism in so many areas of our life. So we don't need to shame ourselves for that, right? We were taught to mask from such a young age. So let's get curious. Let's learn from ourselves, right? Unmasking. Let's talk about that. If this is something that you want to explore, where do you start? Because unmasking is not about like throwing yourself into full vulnerability with every stranger you meet. Right. To me, that reminds me of like, I used to have those naked dreams as a child, probably a teenager more so, like where you would like all of a sudden have this dream and you were like in your school and you were like naked and then like the bell would go and all your classmates would come outside and you like couldn't cover yourself up. And it was like, ugh, like horrible, scary, terrible dream, right? Like it's a nightmare, like this vulnerability, vomit inducing kind of a dream, right? We're not wanting to do that. Right? In order to unmask, it's about safety. We mask when we don't feel safe to be ourselves, right? So in order to, start unmasking, we want to start with creating safety to be ourselves. So, are there spaces that you already have where you feel seen and accepted just being yourself? Right? For example, at home, can you unmask at home? Hopefully you're not living in that London flat situation where, you feel like you have to be on all the time and you can't, just be yourself. Right? Do you have a safe person or safe people in your life who accept you as you are? Right? And whether you do or not, can you test unmasking in tiny ways? Are there some people you think possibly could be safe and you can just test it, like experiment in a little way? You will know that you are safe and that these people are safe people for you when you're not shamed, when you're not judged, right? And when you're not only, accepted or liked by them when you are pretending to be somebody that you're not, right? And the more that you experience that kind of safety, the easier it becomes to gradually unmask. One of the most powerful ways I think to start doing that is to spend time in spaces with other ADHDers. I think that helped me really understand myself and, where I was masking and where I was comfortable being myself and just learned so much, right? Whether it's an online community, a forum, an in-person event, or inside my membership, anywhere that you are, being surrounded by people, other adults with ADHD who get it, people who stim, who ramble, right? Who struggle, who, share their weird obsessions and their favorite hobby with you, and then constantly interrupt one another. Seeing that and being with that is so healing. When you see someone else bring their full ADHD self, laughing too loud and information dumping and sharing their special interests and admitting that they forgot to eat today. And then when they are met with such acceptance and love and, oh my gosh, me too, and not judgment, being with that, witnessing that, you start to believe, oh, maybe I could do that too. Maybe I could share with them and they can be my safe people, right? And maybe I could, gradually start to do that with other people in my life. So a couple of things that I really want to leave you with as we wrap up, my friend. You don't need to be the same in every setting. I have seen so often that we have confused, authenticity and masking and am I being fake and all of these sorts of things. And I think it's just so helpful to see that we have different versions of ourselves and we will bring different versions of ourselves to different settings, right? The way I talk to my mum is pretty different to the way I talk to my partner, right? Especially the topics I talk about, the language I use, all of it. Right? So again, you don't need to be the same in every setting, and you're not fake for showing different sides of you, right? In fact, that's totally human. And you also don't have to keep hiding the real you just to be accepted. Masking can be useful, right? Remember, we do it as a form of safety. It's a self-protection mechanism. And it can also be harmful, right? And that's what we want to separate. Is this something that is useful, or is this something that might be harming me? And if it is harming me, what would I like to do about that? Because my friend, you deserve spaces where you don't have to mask, where you can just be yourself. And it takes courage for us to slowly lower the mask, to test the waters with the people who might be safe people, to create safe spaces for ourselves. Okay? And remember that the more you witness other ADHDers doing this, right, doing the same, being their full ADHD self, right, the more you realize that you are not too much, you are not broken, and you certainly are not alone, right? We get it. All right, my friend, ADHD and masking. Huge, huge love. Take care out there. I'll speak to you soon. Hey friend, if you want some more help navigating and thriving with ADHD and some help applying everything that you're learning here on the podcast, then head over to our website, navigatingadultadhd.com.